Hello, everyone. Welcome to Small Town Big Life podcast. We're going to talk about the Civil War, actually, but from a few unique angles. Not so much like just a history class, but have a couple of guests on here that have their hands involved in it and dig a little deeper and from some different angles. So we're going to start right now. All right. I am Pastor Drew Collins, coming at you from the tool shed behind Grace Fellowship Church, and it is hot out today. Now, as I said, we're gonna get into the Civil War, and we're gonna look at it from a few different perspectives. And before I introduce my guests, I want to bring up one interesting thing, because one of my guests is going to enlighten us about some information about the Confederacy. And I grew up in a town where General Sherman's house was, and could not avoid field trips to Civil War landmarks over in Lancaster, Ohio. And now I live in Pennsylvania, which is deeply entrenched in American history. And I wanted to clear up some things. There's a lot of things that bother me personally that people don't understand about the Civil War, and a few facts I wanted to bring up. I'm going to say before I go into my preamble that Kade Gardener is with me. He's one of the media production people at Grace Fellowship Church, and he's deeply involved in Civil War reenactments. He's actively involved in these. And another guest is Matt Miller, a longtime friend who is involved with a group called, I believe it's called Sons of Confederate Veterans. And so I want to talk about that and the Civil War specifically, because a lot of people don't understand the Confederacy. And it's interesting that people say Dixie and the Southern flag is racist, and they accuse people who have any involvement or support of the Confederacy as being racists. Now, well, what is a racist? And that is someone who looks at an entire group of people and labels them negatively and broad strokes the whole group. So they are doing the exact thing they claim to be against. And a lot of people get on the wagon and drink the Kool-Aid, and they don't really study their history. Excuse me. So I want to talk about that before we get to our guests. Now, the United Confederate Veterans was the first immediate organization of Confederate soldiers after the Civil War ended. Now, when that generation died off, the Sons of Confederate Veterans was formed in 1896, and the first commander-in-chief of the Sons of Confederate Veterans was Jeb Stuart Jr., and he was the son of a Confederate cavalry hero, Major General Jeb Stuart. Now, there's a lot to dig into in the South, and one name I want to bring up is a guy named Sammy Travis, and he is in the Sons of the Confederate Veterans. He's a descendant of Private Benjamin Rowe from the Confederate Army. He has cited the most important element of the Civil War as being a fight against big government. And oh, by the way, did I mention to you that Sammy Travis is black? Yeah, that's right. He is black, and he is in the Sons of the Confederate Veterans. Now, many slave owners during the Civil War promised their slaves freedom in exchange for fighting for them, and some even provided freedom to their slaves before the war ended. So the war in the Civil War is, if you look at the Civil War and you think it was all about people that want to keep slaves, you would be sorely mistaken. Another person worth mentioning that a lot of people have heard of is Major General Nathan Bedford Forrest. And yes, Forrest Gump, the character in the movie, was named after Nathan Bedford Forrest. So if you think you've heard that somewhere, that's where it was. But he had 45 slaves. Now, 42 of them fought alongside of him in the Civil War, and his personal guard unit were like the equivalent, now only for the Confederacy, of the Green Berets today. And 20% of his elite fighting unit was black, of those 45 slaves. Now, they were elite fighters. And Forrest, Major General Nathan Bedford Forrest, told them all that at the end of the war, if the Union wins, they will be free. And if the Confederates win, he will set them free. By the time the war was over, one of them deserted his army and the other 40 stayed with him. Now, this speaks to the force of his personality and character. He was able to win their allegiance. And after the war, during the Reconstruction, he tried to get black voters into the fold. Now, I want to be clear about something. Everyone agrees that slavery is wrong and inhumane and terrible and abhorrent before God. But not every person in the South owned slaves. In fact, a large number of those fighting for the Confederate Army did not. In addition, not everyone in the South agreed with slavery. But they did agree on one thing. They agreed on democracy. And as the southern states would continue to participate in the democratic process in regards to addressing slavery, the government would not. So the South knew they had problems. They knew there were issues. There was big commerce and big industry in the North where the government was located. In the South, it was hand-to-mouth labor, but they were providing the goods to the North. So the North says, get rid of slaves. And the South says, well, easier said than done. We're working on it. And there was fighting between the two going back and forth. Well, the government decided that we'll use force and we'll go in and we'll make them stop right now. But, oh, still get us all that product you've been sending. So this was a problem. And this is what lit the powder keg of the Civil War. It wasn't the actual topic of the slaves themselves, because internally most people knew slavery was wrong. It was more the idea that if the government didn't agree with your states and getting things worked out on your own, they would send force in to do it. Now, sadly, the Confederate Army would forever be labeled as those people in the South who want to have slaves, and that is just not true. That is a part of what they were dealing with and what they were trying to get past, but that is not the banner on which they stood in the South. They were fighting for their families, their farms, and they were fighting what they perceived to be government abusing its power. Now, I'm not against the Union Army. I'm not against the Confederate Army. I'm against the human heart problem. Men killing men, and it's been the bloodiest war in history. Is slavery wrong? Yes. Was there good about President Lincoln and the Union trying to stop it? Yes. Are the Confederates evil villains that are racists? No. They are people who were emancipating their part of the country, and I don't mean the slave emancipation, I mean problems. And they were taken over by government hostility before the democratic process was able to complete itself. So, unfortunately, we live in a day and age now where political correctness is popular, and people see the rebel flag, they call it, and in a way it is rebel. It's a rebellion against big government overstepping its bounds and taking physical control. But the truth is, even the slaves who wanted their freedom knew that the government marching in with soldiers and destroying everything was not the solution to freedom. And that's why so many slaves fought for the South, even after being freed. Now, the uprising and the result of the Confederacy was a result of a government that sought to use force to impose its will, and that is how the South responded. Again, the topic of slavery itself has never been disputed by those in the South as morally wrong and abhorrent. They do not, to this day, stand up and say that was their chief fighting principle for the Civil War. The issue of big government overstepping their bounds was at the heart. At the end of the day, my own opinion, if you're asking me around the grill, I think fighting and killing is sad. But I think there were noble men and human beings and God-fearing, Christ-loving family men on both sides who gave their blood, and they were not all identifiable as good, and they were not all identifiable as evil. And that's my take on the Civil War. If you don't know a lot about the Confederacy, you should look into it before just telling people they're evil racists. And we're going to start now. I'm going to introduce my guests. I'm going to introduce Kade. First of all, Kade is actively involved, like I said, with the church media and our film production and our videos, and he does Civil War reenactments. And man, I have a lot of questions about that. So I'm going to have Kade introduce himself, talk a little bit, and then we're gonna move on, and we're gonna talk to Matt and get rolling with Matt. But Kade, real quick, tell everyone about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm 22 years old. I kind of got into Civil War reenacting. I had a couple friends be like, hey, why don't you just come down and check it out? They gave me some loaner gear, and October 2019 is when I first met with them, and November 2019 I was marching in the Remembrance Day Parade.
Wow. So okay. I mean, that's a big part of your life, though. I know it is because
now it is. Yeah.
Yeah. You tell me I can't do this weekend. I can't do that weekend. I've got the Civil War reenactment. So you're a young dude getting into this. That's encouraging to see young people sinking their teeth into history. So we're going to come back to Kade and talk to him a lot. But for right now, we're going to move on to who we have on the phone, Matt Miller. Now, Matt is a good friend of mine and has some direct ties into the Sons of the Confederate Veterans. Sons of it's like a tongue twister if you say it too. Hey, Matt, you there?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, go on and tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm 52 years old, married, 2 kids, mortgage, your basic run-of-the-mill truck driver. Like you said, I'm involved heavily in the SCV, which makes it a lot easier to say.
Right.
The SCV. Other than that, I mean, I got, like you said, I've got ties into the Confederacy. I've got, multiple uncles, great grandfathers. I've got Lewis Lowe, who fought for the 6th Battalion Virginia Reserves. Henry L. McLaughlin was 37th Regiment Virginia Infantry. Sander Fieldings was also 37th Regiment Virginia Infantry and 22nd Virginia Volunteers. And then there's John W. Childress, who was with the Diamond's 10th Kentucky Cavalry.
Oh, wow. Man, that's that.
And
go ahead.
His brother, George Childress, was also in Diamond's 10th Kentucky Cavalry. He was a captain.
Okay.
And and then there's, like I said, there's multiple uncles and whatnot, and my ties stem off of my mother's side of the family, who's all from the Appalachians, and mainly the Panhandle, Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky area right there.
So what are some of the misconceptions and misunderstandings? I know I talked about some of this stuff at the beginning. I mean,
right.
about the Confederacy and that people most commonly have. I mean, what I know that I know there's a lot. I addressed some of it at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest ones is that I see is they're all regarded as traitors. They're traitors to the United States.
Yep.
When the fact of the matter is like you said, they were were having issues with big government overstepping their boundaries, trying to impose taxes. The South had the commerce of tobacco and cotton, which were big, and they supplied probably 70% of the taxes to fund the government at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And Lincoln tried to impose a tariff, a 40% tariff called the Morel Tax Act,
mm-hmm.
which South Carolina was the first to succeed. They succeeded in 1860 on December 20th. And they actually had an agreement with James Buchanan, which was our 15th president, that they were going to succeed. And he said, fine, I'm not happy with it, but whatever. You're right, because it's in the Constitution. And they said, okay, well, we won't supply the forts anymore. We will remove our troops. And that was it. Lincoln took over. They burnt Fort Moultrie to the ground, and they took over Fort Sumter. And when they refused to leave, South Carolina took that as an act of war, and that's when General Beauregard fired on Fort Sumter. And that was the first shot in the Civil War.
Oh man!
And go ahead.
No. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Like I said, I went down a rabbit hole.
No, that's fine, man.
Yeah, but they're regarded as traitors. They were just wanted to leave the Union because they weren't abiding by.
You there?
Hand.
Hey, you're cutting out. Hey, Matt, you there, buddy?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you cut out. You said they wanted to leave the Union because they wouldn't abide, and then I lost you.
Yeah, they wanted to leave the Union because they wouldn't abide by the Constitution. They were trying to manhandle them and impose the extra taxes and whatnot on them.
Yeah.
And so, and for the Constitution, it was perfectly legal. Secession was perfectly legal. And that's something that people, when they look at the Civil War, they need to understand that, yes, if one hadn't happened, the other wouldn't happen. But secession and the war are two completely different things.
Mm-hmm.
The states leaving was completely legal by the Constitution.
Explain secession for people listening that may not know what that means.
Well, succession, like they're part of a union,
mm-hmm.
okay, and they decide that they no longer want to be part of this group, so they decide to cut ties and leave.
Yeah.
And it's like you and your buddies are members of an organization, and the organization, the dues have gone up. There's too many fees. They're not following the mission statement or the bylaws or whatnot, and it's perfectly legal, written in your bylaws, that if you guys want to leave and form your own little organization, that's perfectly fine. And that's what happened, is they separated and went to do their own thing. And when they did that, 7 states succeeded at first, South Carolina, and then it went Florida and Georgia, Alabama, and whatnot. And when they did that, Lincoln rallied 75,000 troops to go down and stop the rebellion after the shot was fired on Fort Sumter.
Mm-hmm.
That act right there is what catapulted the other states leaving and joining the Confederacy, because they thought it was wrong for one half of the country to be fighting with the other half.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's an unfortunate set of circumstances. I mean, it's the growing pains, horrible growing pains of a new nation that go through, back through history, that go through these type of things. And you're right, we were still cutting our teeth as a country, and when the prospect of the Revolutionary War was still fresh in people's minds, and they were descendants of people who didn't trust the crown, and now Americans were very suspicious of their own government. So anything that could be perceived as the government coming in and taking control with military force, Americans were a little on edge about that, saying there's no way we're ever going to let that happen here. So the bite back was going to be severe if someone attempted it, and someone did attempt it. And yeah. So how are you proactively? I mean, like, I know you ride. I know you're with a group. I know you're with a club of like-minded people. Which, by the way, I didn't say this, but you do have to be able to prove your lineage to be in the group, to be connected to someone. So, for the listeners out there, so. I mean, I see a lot of stuff and camaraderie and brotherhood and interesting educational material from the organization, like on your Facebook page and when I talk with you. But what do you guys do to, raise the awareness about the facts versus the fiction?
Well, we do a lot of stuff. We participate in parades. We go out, and our main goal, our main thing is to honor and uphold the Confederate veterans' good name. So we go in and we take care of the monuments. We go in and take care of the graveyards, mow them, weed them, clean the headstones and that kind of stuff. We pass out. We go to like the Civil War show and other events and set up tables and pass out pamphlets. Basically, I personally wear my SCV gear. I wear it everywhere, and I try to just to try to get people to talk. Even if they want to make a derogatory comment about, it opens the door to say, no, look at this.
Sure.
Look at this. And so.
To start a conversation.
Just to start a conversation.
Yeah.
I get perceived as being, like you said, being perceived as being a racist or what have you all the time. But it opens the door and gives you the opportunity for education.
So what speaking of that, Ray, that's the big thing now, taking down
Yes.
monuments and saying the rebel flag is racist, and people say, but it hurts my feelings, because the big thing now is people getting their feelings hurt. And
Correct.
Which is, I don't know how you get through life with that, but it, with the craziness of people, they look at the flag and they think strictly only of the aspect of slavery and dismiss the entirety of the political affairs, the financial affairs, the economic affairs, and
Exactly.
the people defending their farms and their homes. They throw all that in the garbage, and then they take the smaller segment of the South, which are the slave owners, and say the whole war was about slavery, and therefore that flag is racist. I hate it. Take it down. I mean, how do you respond to that? How do you defend that when people say Dixie is racist?
Well, I mean, there's so much. When somebody looks at me and says, they were racist. Well, first off, you go all the way back and go through, why they succeeded with the taxes and the government overreach and all that, and then the fact that if you look at it, it's estimated that only 4 to 6% of people in the Confederacy actually owned slaves.
I know. And those are facts people don't like. They don't. That's
right. They don't. They
it doesn't
do not
fit
like,
the
they don't
narrative, right?
That you have to look at Lincoln and Lincoln's policies as far as the slavery goes. That you talked about misconceptions. One of the hugest misconception is the fact that they were fighting for slavery, and like you said, it's intertwined with the economic issues that they were going through, but that wasn't their main focus. That wasn't their. And Lincoln's policy was to recolonize blacks back to Africa.
And South America, because I remember that, because he thought when the Civil War was over that blacks would be treated horribly, hunted down, lynched, and as retaliation, and that they would have a horrible life. That's when he, I think, first started use the term "the boys" that people now are offended by, and he wanted to send them to Brazil or something, and people don't ever talk about that, but he said it would be for their own good, but yet he did want to deport them for their own good. For their own good,
he wanted to deport them. If you look at his debate speech in 1858 with Stephen Douglas. Where he states that I have not now nor ever been in favor of making jurors or voters of blacks, and that there needs to be a designation of superior and inferior, and I am in favor of the superior going to the white race.
Yeah.
There's so many different things where he thought that there was no way that we could live together. There were too many differences between the blacks and the whites that we could never live together. They would never be seen equal on this continent. So, He wanted to get, like you said, deport them.
Yeah, and he claimed it. It was for their own good. It's like I said at the beginning. It's an unfortunate state of affairs when you if you look at the Civil War just from I'm a pastor and I see the human heart problem, like which exists in every race of people. It's just in mankind. It is the problem. And when I think about the North or the South, where I grew up, and in Pennsylvania, there's monuments here in the town that honor the Union soldiers, and I respect those monuments. And when I see monuments that the Confederacy, now I do think it's funny that the prevailing attitude still exists in a lot of Southern learning institutions, because some of them still refer to it as the War of Northern Aggression. And
exactly.
And I do laugh. I do think it's funny, but I know there's truth in it. And
there is truth.
I know there's truth in it, right? And I just think to this day, though, I mean, it's hard to. I just see the human beings, the human element, and I understand the growing pain, the growing pains. What did Thomas Jefferson say? The tree of liberty is often watered with blood, or something like that. It grows by being watered with blood. And I think of families and mothers and fathers and children, and it's sad. I know that anyone who's connected to anyone that fought in the Civil War on either side has a very, a special place in their heart of things to think about. I don't think that we're so far away from the Civil War now. For me, I have to respect any man that fought on any side, and particularly the slaves. I mean, that fought. And you think about, you talk about being in a difficult set of circumstances, and then these men take up arms on top of what they've already got to contend with. And
exactly.
Yeah, it's just like it's a bowl of human soup, and history just turned the burners up on everyone. And when I try to look at it through the God perspective, looking down and saying, man, this is heartbreaking. And so, respect the people as human beings, and I'm just saddened by war and death. But I know that people got to protect themselves, and they got to fight for what they believe in. It's just it's a head scratcher, and I think anyone who suffered through it deserves the respect as human beings.
Well, those monuments are basically headstones. Those are
that's a good way to
put there.
Yeah,
they are. They're basically headstones. They are put there for all the men, all the boys that didn't come home.
Yeah. And
they're buried in battlefields, mass graves, and whatnot. And their town, they put up a big monument, and it's a headstone, and it should be respected as such.
I agree.
Not spray painted or tore down or knocked over, or because somebody has the ideology of what they think happened or what it was about, instead of doing any type of research and actually educating themselves.
Yeah, that's the problem now. The folks who get their history from memes and Facebook sayings, and
exactly,
and don't actually look into the stuff. And that goes for anything. I mean, but I've always taught my daughters, the reason you have to learn history is because if you don't learn it, you're doomed to repeat it. And and you really need to go after it and dig deep into it before you say something. And I mean, I think we learn the hard way in life. Go ahead.
I put stuff on Facebook all the time about the Sons of Confederate Veterans and the Civil War, and I put quotes from generals. I put different stuff from our organization on there, and it doesn't take but minutes before I've got some graduates from the Facebook community college on there just tapping away, giving me
right.
So but
the union, that's the union coming, man.
Like we talked, you asked me about the racist issue of it, and people thinking it's racist. There was a 13th Amendment proposed. It was written by an Ohio representative named Thomas Corwin. It was called the Corwin Amendment, and it passed the 36th Congress of the United States on March 2nd, 1861. And in a nutshell, basically what it said is, if you will accept our taxes and come back to the Union, we'll make slavery permanent.
Yeah.
You can keep your slaves. You can keep your slaves. So why pick up a gun?
Yeah.
If that's what you're fighting for, if that's what you want, why pick up a gun? Why fire a shot?
Yeah.
You got what you want.
Right.
You know, so it's frustrating that people can't. Like, it's right there on. You can go to the Library of Congress and you can search. You can search the web. You can find this information if you actually want to look for it.
Yeah, yeah. And being in the North like we are, you have to dig a little deeper to uncover what was happening in the South, because in the schools here, even when I was young in school, they did still teach a lot of the truth of what was going on the Confederate side, but there was always with a tinge of the Union was the good guys and the Confederates were the bad guys, and there still is. In the back of my mind, I still have that. I was raised with it, and I still think it, but I know that it's an enriching thing when you pull back when you open up and dust off the books of history. And people, I've had people say to me, "Well, how do you know what to believe?" And it's not. I said, "Well, the way you research it, the best." Excuse me, is you read the letters that were written to family members and to the armies from back then, that have been authenticated, documented, the guys who wrote their wives, generals who wrote their subordinates, politicians that wrote each other. That's where you get your information, not by people putting memes up on Facebook. And I think if people would look a little deeper into the Southern culture and the Confederacy, they would see these aren't, because the Klan using the rebel flag as part of their paraphernalia is what damaged Dixie. And the whole
1960s Dixiecrats with the segregation and all that, and they're flying the rebel flag or the battle flag, as you want to call it,
right?
Which that makes no sense to me. That it's just because that flag is the most recognized. Yeah, it was actually never an official flag of the Confederacy. That is a military flag. It is to represent troops on the battlefield. That's what it's for. That's what it was used for. Yeah, that's it. So and if you want to turn around, you can look at the Stars and Stripes, because slavery was more prominent under that than it was for the 4 years that flag ever flew. Yeah, but, and a lot of people bring that up. Yeah. So but it's funny that you should mention the teaching of the teaching of history and how the school teachers did it and stuff. And it's if it's okay, I want to read this quote. Sure. It's from General Patrick Claiborne. He's an Irish immigrant. He was born in Ireland. And his quote is, "Surrender means that the history of this heroic struggle will be written by the enemy, that our youth will be trained by Northern school teachers, learn from Northern school books their version of the war, and taught to regard our gallant dead as traitors and our maimed veterans as fit subjects for derision." So true. He nailed it. He did nail it. I know from, being an art student in school so long, you learn about the cultures from ancient cultures, and cultures never, ever spend time documenting their losses, only their victories. And and the ones who have the victories are the ones who teach the history, because the ones who lose don't talk about it. And in America, they take the side that they perceiving to as one and say, well, it's got to go in the books now. These guys were right because they won. And they don't. They're not going to write anything that makes them look bad. Right. And unfortunately, that is a global issue. So yes, and it's worth. Now, there's some things that are no-brainers. I mean, the Nazi agenda, there was nothing good about what Hitler stood for. No, that's there's some things that we know throughout history right away that the entire thing was just absolutely evil. But there are a lot of things where the more you look into them, the more people
people would call the Indians savages for scalping, but they didn't start doing that. The French soldiers started that. They started cutting ponytails off of Indians and hanging them on their muskets, and the Indians responded by going a step further with the scalping. And it's like when you don't look into this stuff, you're stuck with the bumper sticker version of history, and it's dangerous. Yep. It's dangerous. So and again, the idea of whether you want to take a side of the North or the South, for me personally, is impossible to take a side. I just see it as a tragedy, and I feel in my heart for the families of those who suffered and for those men who gave their lives. And no man is perfect before God, but I know men,
Nope.
We are to fight for what we believe in. And, I think the small segment of those who own slaves and were fighting strictly for slavery, I think it's a shame that they have now soiled the entire Southern culture with that because of Dixie. And how did your life personally enriched from this? Because I know it's a part of your life, and I know it's a very meaningful. I mean, what has it done for you? Because you and I, for people who don't know, Matt and I go way back in terms of writing music together and rock and roll and playing together, and we're big time musicians. And for those listening, I want to kind of go down a rabbit hole for a second. I was one of the people that were into the drugs and alcohol and craziness, and Matt never took part in any of that kind of nonsense. He was never into drugs and alcohol and acting like an idiot. He was always like a solid stand-up guy. And so I know, but I do know what music meant to me, and I know what it meant to him when we were coming up together and young. And I know as we get older, our value systems actually deepen in some areas. And so how is your involvement in this, in your Confederate legacy enriched your life, I guess? I know that's kind of a cliche word, but go ahead.
I don't know. It's definitely gave me a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
It's given me a deeper appreciation for history in general, not just the Civil War, but history in general.
Sure.
I would have never believed that, back in the 9th grade, when I'm looking at this and going, why do I need to know that George Washington sailed across the Delaware? I'm never going to need that, but now it's enthralling.
Yep. Go ahead,
it's
man.
amazing. But it also, going through all this research, and researching, the Confederacy and looking at my lineage and whatnot, I found that one of the things that when you look at Stonewall Jackson or Robert E. Lee or any of these generals, people from the South, they were big time Christians. They were big time with their faith was a huge part of their life.
I know.
And it actually is one of the things that, I was already going to church, because Dwight had invited me to come play the drums, and I was already going, and I was listening to, Pastor Bob.
Sure.
Who's, he's already,
my mentor.
Make knowledge attractive.
Mm-hmm.
But I started taking an extra step and paying even more attention to it, and it's one of the things that catapulted me into being a Christian.
Wow.
It really, and so, that's one of the biggest ways it's enriched my life.
That's amazing, man. I'm right there with you when you say, when you're little, you're like, I don't need to know this. I got to get out, man. I got this chick I met, and I want to go on a date, and I want to play my guitar, and I got stuff to do. Okay, George Washington, whatever. I'm never going to need this information. And then you get older, and you start seeing what's on the news, and then you start thinking about history, and you're like, man, this is pretty interesting stuff. And then you want to start learning. When I tell you, man, I learned more about world history in art school than I did in high school. And I'm not going to take the whole podcast on a left turn there, but it was, the older I get, the more interested history becomes.
Right.
So, yeah, I totally am on board with you right there. Hey, Matt, before we jump over to Kade here, you want to close out with anything? I think you said you're going to stick around and stay on the phone with us, right?
I am going to stick around. I want to listen to the rest of the podcast.
Awesome. Go ahead.
Just, there's really, just educate yourself. I mean, look at it. Look at the men that, you know, these men that were, like I said, Stonewall Jackson, you know, Robert E. Lee. This was only 4 years of their life.
Right.
That was it. It was 4. They have a whole life wrapped around. They were amazing men, and, you know, stand up Christians, and, you know, educate yourself. Look into this stuff, and before, you know, pointing a finger and making an assumption, like you said, from a Facebook meme or you know, getting your information from somebody who got their information from somebody else who doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yep.
You know, just, I don't know. There's so many examples of, you know, Stonewall Jackson, and he used to run a Sunday school to teach black children to read and write, which was against Virginia law.
Yep.
You know, and so they, you know, and when he went to war, when he went off to war, he sent contributions to keep that Sunday school going. And there's actually a church in Roanoke, Virginia that has a black church in Roanoke, Virginia that has a stained glass window with an inscription on it, and you know, for his memory.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah, I know their faith played a big part of it. There's a lot of stories about Lee showing a tremendous amount of compassion to Union soldiers, and there's also a lot of stories about Lincoln showing tremendous compassion to Confederate soldiers. And so, I mean, you do get to see, when you study history, the humanity in these people, and and like you said, their relationship with their faith and with God, and it changes your perspective when you see these as human beings and not broad stroke them as some kind of, you know, well, you're a racist and you're a terrorist and you're, you know. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. I didn't mean to interrupt you, man. You were doing your closer there.
Not at all. No, I'm pretty much got it done.
Okay. Well, Matt, thanks for your insight. That's awesome. I'm glad you're gonna. There we go. Yes, we got applause. All right. I love Matt. He's a great guy. He's going to stick around on the phone with us for a while and listen and maybe chime in every now and then. We're gonna move on to Kade. And as I said, Kade's 22 years old, and he's like so deep into this stuff. He loves it. He does the reenactments. I've seen him in his gear. I've talked to him. I see this. He's a bright young guy. He seems to be interested in all the right stuff, you know, with the things we talk about and the things he shares with me. And and he's done things that I've got a ton of questions about. I grew up in Lancaster, Ohio. Again, you know, now I live in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania. Our church is in Avis. I've never been to a Civil War reenactment. The one we have back home is called Tecumseh, and it's huge. Everyone goes to that. I have not been to it. It's obviously centered around Tecumseh, and I just got a ton of questions to ask Kade. Now, Kade is not one of the top organizers in this. He's one of the guys that gets out there and gets dirty and does the stuff and takes part. So, Kade, how did you get interested in Civil War stuff? Because we were talking about young people not being so interested. What got you interested in the Civil War stuff when you were?
I've always been interested in history. I was a big World War II buff, but like I said, I had a couple friends ask me if I wanted to check out the Civil War era. As you know, most Pennsylvanians, everybody knows Gettysburg. Everybody likes going down to Gettysburg, you know, as a family trip during the summer. I was always interested in the reenactments growing up, whether it be down at Gettysburg or up in Boalsburg, where they have the Pennsylvania War Museum.
Right.
They normally do World War II stuff over there. That's why I hung out there. But they kind of just asked me if I wanted to check it out, and I've been hooked on being a living monument, if you will.
So, I mean, how did you? That's how you got involved with the actual reenactments?
I just had a couple guys go like, "Hey, do you want to check this out one week?"
And when check it out, I mean, you show up and you just go. They got clothes and say, "Hey, get dressed," and we're gonna because what I picture is I think back to when I was a kid, and it's free for all, and we're running around, we're going to take your dads, and we're playing, and I watch these guys do these reenactments, and I start thinking to myself, man, this is this has got to take like a lot of work. I mean, because this is choreographed, this is thought out, it looks real, and it's heavy duty stuff. So when they told you, do you want to check it out? So I mean, what's involved in checking it out?
So the way they did it, I met a buddy of mine now. His name's Chris Hawkins. He was the head of our unit, that one unit I belong to. Mm-hmm. I met him in Gettysburg in October of 2019, and he had some old stuff that he was a bigger guy, so he had old stuff he wanted to get rid of and used it as loaner gear. He gave it to me to try on. It fit. I threw it on, and into the car it went. Next week, I went back down, and we had a little drill. We got into kit, and I guess you'd call it marching, and just kind of walked from Little Round Top down to Devil's Den, and back around the 6th U.S. Monument, and back up to Little Round Top.
So your first introduction was basically getting acclimated by getting in the gear and doing the marching and the cadence and that kind of stuff. It wasn't the actual fighting stuff.
No.
Right, which makes sense now that you say it.
So my first battle, I mean, I wouldn't even. It was more of a skirmish. Was the July of 2020 because of COVID, everything got moved. That was in Rising Sun, Maryland.
So you were getting started right when I started here, because I got here July 1st. And so...
And a couple weeks later... I was absent for a weekend. Actually, no, I came back up that Sunday. I left early.
Yeah.
I left Saturday night. It was a Friday through Sunday event. I left Saturday night to get back up here so I could live stream the church service.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And we had a skirmish. It was in a local park in Rising Sun. They had railroad tracks that up across the top and a creek down through the end, and maybe 10 on 10 if we had that many. So and we separated. And
when you say you had a skirmish, you mean a planned fight type thing?
It wasn't as planned as, Gettysburg or we have Philippi coming up here soon, which is down in West Virginia. But I know this weekend we have the Walkersville train raid in Walkersville, Maryland.
Right.
So there's fighting coming off the train as well as on the train. And there's going to be actual civilians, so you could get a train ticket and ride the train while all this is going on.
So you're on a train cruising by, and all of a sudden you see Confederates and Union soldiers going at it.
Basically, yes, but the neat thing is the members are actually on the train with the general public.
Oh wow!
So there's fighting going on in the train with the general public right there. So this Saturday will be my first time doing that event, and we have it again in the fall as well.
Who runs these things? How are they funded? How do they get the money for this? I mean, who's like I want to get involved and I don't know anybody. Where do I go to say, you know what, man, I'm really into the Civil War reenactment stuff. Who's the top guys? Who puts this together?
I'm by no means an expert on any of this.
Oh no, that's fine. What's your take on it?
From my understanding is if you have somebody that's in the hobby, or even if you go to a reenactment, you could, pull somebody that's there reenacting, hey, I want to learn more, and sometimes they'll pull you down into camp to talk to you more.
Yeah, I know it's emotional for some guys because there's the Sons of the Confederate Veterans, and there's the equivalent of that in the Union as well. Just men who have lineage of Civil War. Sometimes they get involved in this stuff because they want to touch. They can't live it, but they want to touch that experience and internalize it, and they're just to kind of live it and see as close as they can get to it, to that intensity they experience. And then there's young guys like you that are just like, man, this is really interesting. And then there's people who have an emotional attachment. So I know it's a very serious thing. And, I mean, I guess I'm just trying to figure out what that's, what do they tell you when you get there? If you want to do this, do they say, well, what side do you want to fight on? And what's, when you got into it, I'm sure you have someone you have to answer to, right?
Yeah. So I belong to two companies.
Okay.
I belong to the 6th United States, which is just the regulars. And then
Now, is that Union or Confederate?
It's Union.
Okay.
When I joined Federal just because I don't know my lineage if anywhere falls.
Well, no, that's fine. Well, plus there's Union. I get that. That's
And well, a lot of my friends, they fight both sides,
right.
so they have thousands of dollar kits for both sides, and more power to them.
Yeah, that's wow.
But from what I understand is the 45th PVI, we have a board sorta. So we have a president of the company, and then it goes down to secretary, treasurer, and all that. And if there's an event that's coming up, so we have a meeting, and we go through all the events that are on the on the list for the year. You don't have to go to every event. I mean, everybody can't make everything.
Sure.
But you go through the list of events. These are the ones we want to go to. These are the ones we're not so interested in. And they actually asked me the same question you did, how'd I get involved? And I'm like, one of my buddies that I met through Chris and them, Destin, he goes, I want you to check out this, I think we did Antietam on that event. Because I want you to check this out and come hang out with the 45th PVI. All right. And that I did, and that's the second company I joined. And
so when you get there, you get involved, you get there, and you do you show up in your gear? Do they have dress? I mean, is there okay? Oh man, there's so many questions. I mean, how do they choreograph it? Like, do they go by you and say you're going to get shot right away, and then or you go down in 10 minutes, or do you wear blood packs? Do you just fall? Or because Jackie Brown, who was off camera, by the way, is flying the plane. She runs the board, and we were having a conversation about this the other day, and she brought up an interesting point that I'd never thought of. You grew up in Gettysburg, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so she was telling me about, well, these guys that go out there and get killed right away, they got to lay in the hot June sun till all this is over.
In the wool uniforms.
Yeah, it happened to me in August.
Body.
Yep.
Yeah, and so do they? I mean, are you like, what if you're one of the poor slubs that they go, you got to go down right away?
From my experience so far, they haven't told anybody this is when you're going down.
Really? These guys can. Well, then what's the stuff? If I was a Confederate and they said you don't have to go down, I'm going to the general. I'm taking him out, man. And I mean, the little kid in me would come roaring forward. I think I don't know.
So they're based off of actual battles that happened.
Right.
So you have the movements that have been documented.
That's what I mean, but you have to know that if you're. If you're on the battlefield, and even if it's a reenactment, some guys are going to have to take one for the team. I mean, they're going to have to.
It happens.
They're going to have to say, well, man, I got to go down because nobody else is going down. And
so I've talked to a few people, and they said some people will put X's on their cartridge packs.
Okay.
On their rounds.
Right.
And they'll look at their round before they go to bite it off and dump it into the muzzle loader. So if there's an X on their round, after they fire that shot, they take a hit.
Okay.
They go down. Then other people will tell me it's whenever you feel like, say you're getting too hot, you can take a hit and go down.
Right.
Or I did it, there wasn't a big number of people there.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, nobody's fallen in, X amount of time.
Right.
I went down.
Yeah.
That's how I gauged it, is if nobody's going down and you have the public watching, it looks kind of...
Yeah, it looks weird. That's what I mean. I thought there would be because the way you describe it, it makes it sound like they're like, hey, just get out there and, do a good job. Good luck.
Well, I know, like I said, I'm really bad at explaining it.
I would think there would be, some accountability for, what you have to do.
The longer, I guess, you're in the hobby,
yeah,
the more you know when to take a hit and when to go down, because you'll notice, the little things.
Do they use the blood packs and all that stuff? Because when you and Jackie were talking to me the other day about it, she brought up another point, and I think you echoed it. She said, when you're standing in front of that cannon, and even though there's no cannonball in it, just the boom, and I know about loud noises and firearms and all that stuff, but I think
get your adrenaline going.
The psychological, yeah, like you were saying, even when men are pointing guns at you and you see them being fired, even though nothing's coming out of them, there's something about that gets you going. And I would think, I think it's one of those things that's probably way more intense when you go than by watching it on film. Or I'm not a race fan, but I went to the Indy 500 because I had a police escort and the best seats in the house, and I just fell into this really lucky situation, and it was a life-changing event, and I had no interest in watching it on TV.
Yeah, it's totally different.
Yeah, everything is different, and I bet that's like you grew up. Jackie grew up in Gettysburg.
Yeah, I grew up about 10 minutes north of Gettysburg in a town called Biglerville. Truly, the reason they don't use the squibs and the blood packs is because the uniforms are so expensive. They don't want to damage them.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
So they're spending, like you said, there's like $1,000 for the setup
for a good kit. You're spending
easy.
thousands of dollars. So my winter jacket that I'm getting custom made to my specifications, $450, $500 alone.
Yep.
Oh man, that's a lot. I mean, well,
I got lucky. Like I said, I had loaner gear to start.
Are there guys that fight over? I want to be General Lee. I mean, I would imagine there's got to be a dozen guys that want that gig.
You actually have a few that will.
Seniority rules, I would imagine. Yeah.
Well, yes, but you also have the few that almost resemble him. And that their whole life they've
worked at it,
worked to look like him and act like him and train like him. Like the Remembrance Day Parade in Gettysburg, November. It's usually right around the 19th.
Right.
So about the same time that the Gettysburg Address was delivered.
So a lot of the guys swap sides. You said some of them are just into the whole. That's if I was going to be involved, that's what I would do. I mean, if I had the dough, if I had the coin to spring for the clothes, I would probably want to experience it from both sides. Because like we was talking to Matt, I just see the whole thing as a part of the human struggle, but you respect these guys that are out there. They're praying to God, they're hoping to do the right thing. They're begging for forgiveness when they don't, and they're asking for God's help when they are. And these are human beings, man. I look at it from, man. It's just, I think I would want to. Your union, though, like you said, once you blow your coin on the stuff, you're like committed.
You wait a while.
Yeah.
But like I said, to go, both sides, we have friends on either side. Like, we don't really think, oh, you're evil because you're fighting on the Confederate side.
Well, sure, yeah, I didn't think.
But
yeah,
like, Rising Sun, we would walk down to the Confederate camp and hang out with them and eat food and drink if you were of age.
Eat
Sure.
hardtack.
so
Hardtack's not bad with coffee.
It's terrible.
Have you ever made your own though?
Yes.
like, what do you guys
We
talking
had
about?
to in high school.
So hardtack, it's
You take a saltine. It's essentially
a thick
a
saltine.
thick saltine cracker that never goes bad,
3 to 6 months.
and they carry it in their pocket at all times because that's all you
Oh
had to
yeah,
eat.
they used to call them biscuits.
Flour, salt,
Too.
and water.
Just nasty.
Yeah.
If you dip it in coffee, it's not bad.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing. The struggle of just the way things work.
Salted pork.
Yuck.
But something
So-
I didn't know if I can just jump in 1 second.
Yeah,
If you were familiar with Kade, some of the people stay in character. Like the actor Daniel Day-Lewis, they do not break character. You can't refer to them by their real first name. You have to address them by their rank.
It's hard to. That would be. I've done acting. I've done theater acting. I've acted in short films, and that kind of that would be. I've never done anything like that. I know some people are like that. I just kind of stay away from them. If like I mean, if I'm acting or something, I don't go talk to them beforehand. I'm like, well, that's dude's method. Let him do it. Whatever.
Yeah. So in camp, we really don't use, first names. At least unless you were the same rank or.
You say things like private.
Well, the head guys will.
Yeah.
And then you'll address them by rank. But if you guys are along the same lines, you would use your first name. So I kind of want to use the modern day military. Your E1 through E3.
Okay.
Your private to private, first class, second class, and that.
Right.
Those are your, you're going to call them by your first name because you guys are the same pay grade.
Okay.
And then as you get out of that pay grade, you start using rank.
Wait, you
and
get
name.
paid for this?
No.
Okay.
I was using it with modern day military.
Right. That makes sense.
So you start using rank and last name. So, I mean, then you have a few guys that have just been in it long enough together that they don't even acknowledge rank when they're in camp.
Man, what do you think about this, Matt? You ever thought about getting into this stuff?
Yeah, we have a lot of people in the SCV that do this stuff. Like he said, that resemble that resemble the characters. Like we have a guy who resembles Forrest and another one that resembles Lee, and they dress up for the parades and they do the reenactment stuff as well. I personally, I've never thought about getting into it. One, it is very expensive.
It also looks a lot like exercise.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, especially for my age. That's
not as much as you think.
Yeah. If I fell on the battlefield, it'd be legit, man.
Well, the fields aren't always even.
Yeah, well, that's right. I got bad knees. Oh, what happened? That guy didn't even. He took
a shot to the knee.
He stood up and fell over. So, anyway, yeah. Well, I think Matt has kind of my perspective on it. The more interested you get in history, the more you learn you don't want to go out and do it to your body. Is that about right, Matt?
You got that right.
I'm still young enough to do it to my body.
Yeah, and that's good. We need guys like that. Man, that's I just can't. So I got in my notes, how has that enriched your life and appreciation for history? Sounds kind of a generic question, but I bet it does. I mean, I bet you. I mean,
without a doubt.
Yeah.
It's just like I already had a big love for history.
Yeah.
I mean, those of you that don't know me, like I was going to school to become a secondary education history teacher.
Right.
So just being immersed into it, just your love for history grows, and you start to see things that you didn't learn in school.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of things that I learned just in the last year and a half, 2 years that I would have never touched when I was in school.
Right.
I mean, the appreciation for it. I mean, I thank all the guys that have helped me get on my way. You know, between Chris giving me the loaner gear, Destin gifted me a rifle at one point. I still have it. I still use it, you know, every reenactment. But it's the little things like that help the newer guys that are coming in.
Yeah. Do you get a lot of guys that come in in other words, are they ever short? I mean, they're like, oh man, we got enough guys, and do they ever get too many, or how does the flow of soldiers work?
I've never seen too many, but Rising Sun, we had 3 to 4 federal troops compared to 15 Confederates.
Oh man, that's 3 to 4 single, like 4, like that's it?
People, yep.
Oh boy.
So it was me, Destin, Chris, and another person was the.
What's the average size for these battles? Are you like in like Anderson? I mean, do you do the big ones where there's like tons of guys there, or are these skirmishes that mostly you're involved in?
No, in Antietam there was trying to think, in the Union camp alone, we had I think 6 or 7 alleys.
Okay.
Or streets, I guess there's what they call them, which is basically your company's row of tents.
Okay.
And there's probably 10 to 15 tents per street, and a tent can have 1 person in it or 2 people. You just never know.
Oh, wow.
Between artillery, cavalry, and infantry.
It sounds like I wish I was young and had the energy. I would go, because I used to make fun of that stuff. I'd be like, "Oh, those guys are silly." That's before you get smart and wise and you start appreciating history. And man, that sounds like I've seen you in your some of your outfit stuff that you wear. Like,
yeah,
I think you came here after one time around.
No, I for Halloween for the trunk or treat.
That's right. Yeah,
I threw on some of my gear.
Because you were just wearing, I thought you were wearing a woman's slip from the thrift store, and I'm like, and then I got closer, I was like, oh no, that's men's Civil War stuff.
Yeah, I didn't wear my jacket that night. It was still being made. If you ever want authentic gear made well, locally is Milady's Parlor in Gettysburg. Miss Eileen, this is not a paid ad at all.
No, I don't care. You can say whatever you want.
She absolutely takes care of you. And most reenactors, that I know go through her to get stuff.
I just want to. The next time there's a political riot, the guy that wore the buffalo horns and all that, I want to get like a General Lee suit and just show up and stand somewhere and go. Trust me, if I wanted to intimidate you, you'd be intimidated. No, I'm kidding. I'm not a guy that wants to start trouble. I can't. That's a lot of coin. You got to have a commitment to blow that money on that stuff.
Yeah, and
because
the nice thing about Miss Eileen, she works with you.
Yeah.
If you can't pay it all up front, you put down so much that you can.
If that's what she does, I bet you she loves doing it. I mean, because
Well, she can do Rev War too.
most people that do good work love what they do. Have you ever seen Jackie's paintings? They're pretty phenomenal.
I have not.
You should go to her Facebook page.
Well, we just became friends on Facebook.
She's got
We'll
fat
get
mad
there.
skills. She went to art school too, except she went because she's good at art, and I went because I had to, because I had to get into film and media. I'm not that good at art. I mean,
No, I can't draw. I mean, I can draw tattoos. That's about it.
right.
Nice.
So anyway, back on track. So she makes the Civil War stuff. Like I said, people that do that kind of stuff are pretty passionate about it. So
Oh, yeah.
I would imagine she is pretty crafty. We're way past our time limit. We actually got to close out. I'm going to go back to Matt right now, see if he has any closing words. First of all, I want to say thanks, Matt. Thanks for coming on and talking.
Hey, not a problem. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, the Sons of the Confederate Veterans. For anybody who wants, some legitimate information on that, look it up, because there's a rich history, just like with all human beings. So, well, thanks again, Matt. You have anything else to say before we start rolling out?
No, I'm good.
Okay, buddy. I appreciate what you've done. Oh wow, there's he's showing me what is that? That looks like
It's a suit from, I think, right around the early 1800s.
See if
or
the
so.
camera can get that. I'm not sure if
That's something Miss Eileen has done.
this looks like a zoot suit or something. Like, I want to dance when I see this. I want to dance to 30s music.
No.
Exactly.
Good timing.
Zoot suit riot. Yeah, that's.
But no, that's some of the stuff that she's made, and
Yeah,
I sent it to Gabby, and I'm like, I want to get this.
yeah,
No rhyme or reason. I just want to get it.
right. Yeah, I see clothes like that too. It's usually got Star Wars characters on it. Or I still have. I think I got Spider-Man pajamas, but I can't. They're too tight. I look like a bratwurst with a rubber band on. It doesn't.
I used to wear the onesie pajama for Christmas Eve service.
Sweet.
I can't fit in that no more.
Do you have Civil War pajamas? Are you like really into it to where you're a dork all the time? I'm just kidding.
when we're at a reenactment, I kind of just keep the trousers and shirt on.
Right.
Change your socks. Always change your socks.
What's your parting words of wisdom as we close out here?
Me or Matt?
I'm sorry?
Me or Matt?
You. Matt already, we met, I think he's still on the line. He just said, he says he's good, so.
All right. Yeah, just if you can get out to a reenactment, definitely go out and see it. It's
How do people find those, by the way?
you can
Well, you don't have to quote a website, but I mean, if you got Google, can you say Civil War reenactment in my areas, and there's like one organization?
Daniel Lady Farm in Gettysburg, PA. They do a lot of them.
Okay.
You can find them on Facebook. Or if you're into Wild West, Old Bedford Village out in Bedford, PA, they do a Wild West weekend.
Okay. That's awesome, man.
Just kind of look up, different reenactments in your area, and you can pretty much find any of them.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Kade. Thanks again, Matt. Jackie, thanks for flying the plane. We are closing out. We're leaving, and I want to thank everybody. So have a wonderful, wonderful day, and thanks for listening. God bless everyone.